Hello everybody, hello Matt Walsh. This video is for you. I am going to try to say something that I hope you find useful. And it has to do with the absurd extremes that are being manifested in today's Western society, from gay couples wanting to adopt children, lesbian couples wanting to raise little boys as adopted children to prove to themselves they can be a functional family, to gender ideology and teaching the grotesque thing, the one that moves me the most, like I notice it does you too, indoctrinating, trying to teach kids. I don't want to get into it. It's just terrible, revolting how they're revolting for its selfishness, because it really is about these people wanting to prove to themselves that their logical ideology can work, and the only way to verify that to for a human being is to make it real as possible about life. That means children, getting married, raising kids, and so that's why they go after the kids. It's for selfish reasons, to try to answer a question that never gets answered. They're constantly, why pride goes on, and the whole thing, it seems like they never get there. They continue to, we could not be a gayer society ever in human history, perhaps, and yet it just doesn't stop, does it? There's a reason for this. And that's what I want to try to explain. I was a talented spatial designer, little architect as a kid. My mind immediately, when I went to architecture school, and immediately I started seeing what a building will do spatially wise, three-dimensionally. In school they call that being very criticized as being too sculptural and not so program oriented. And for that reason, I'm going to explain this because I know what the criticism upon me is usually, or I can imagine what it is. I'm not well read at all. I tried studying philosophy. I didn't make it past the second page. I'm a visual generation. I pay attention and I'm very interested and I want to learn, and I analyze a great deal, but it's all through listening and visual. And then I write, and I write terribly because I haven't read enough. And I immediately ran into problems when I try to tackle these complicated concepts that I formulate with people who reference things that, or tell me, yeah, that's been talked about already, and really what, and so it takes me to another concept, which I also wanted to see if I can get around to mentioning. But I'm really going to concentrate on this because otherwise I'll be looking at the time. It's already almost 4 minutes. How did this happen? What are all these red... I'm going to explain two things. Why it seems that we're oblivious to all these red flags, mutilating children, taking the rights away from an adopted child to have a mom and a dad, and recruiting them to be the child of lesbians or gay guys. And I know this sounds horrible to a lot of people, and I also understand how they build their logic. It's all about love, and yes, human beings are resilient, and we can actually substitute a great deal of things, not necessarily in the idyllic order that one would give as one definition of natural order. And I realized that there's a big split in when we try to understand why are some people, we typically call it, or I hear people calling it, the left versus the right. And we end up in these polarized political scenarios for lots of countries in the world. And what I've what I have come to formulate as a concept is that we are the society, all people are either a little stronger in the part of our intelligence that is in tune with a more three-dimensional collectivized awareness of existence, and another half, let's just say half, is more clinging onto the part that drives and designs and analyzes the logical production of our intelligence. Both are fused into a single brain in each one of us, but it seems that society expresses what is happening in the human brain, in all of us. There have been, I remember from when a kid hearing a lot of, the female brain and the male brain, so simplistic and so not what it's really about. The creative side and the analytical side. And people have been kind of catching on to this, but we never took it far enough. And yet there couldn't be anything more important for humanity to understand what happens to us. We can do it with animals, objectively. We can, we understand what happens to that species, how the environment influences them, what causes their own homosexuality or males that are not interested in procreating or what have you. We can look at it from a scientifically natural perspective. But when it comes to ourselves, we become instantly dumbfounded. We take off with different attempts, but it seems that we can't just be calm and sober and well-focused when it comes to, for example, explaining human homosexuality. And we create all sorts of, since the beginning of time, we've been dealing with this that catches the attention of guys. That definitely seems to rub guys the wrong way. There's a scientific, biological, natural reason that explains everything, all of it. And we need to relax and stop trusting so much, which is a good advice for all of humanity, to stop trusting blindly and unconditionally the driving of our logical analytical intelligence, because the inventor part of this polarized analysis of the mind, the one that is the logical, the creator, the inventor, the analyzer part of our brain, is not in tune and could not care less about how evolution and natural cosmic creation has designed all collective life forms in the world. It's a product of it. Our very large intelligence, if you compare it to the rest of the animal kingdom, is a tool, something that creation, and when I say creation, I don't mean religiously, I mean evolution-wise, as far as biology and the cosmos, has created to serve itself. It's like its horse, and the carriage is the natural form that simply is. It's the created life form, and the horses of that carriage are, in each species, it's sort of figuring out logical intelligence. In the case of people, ours is just eons, light years, compared to the next animal down from us. And the thing that we have not seized yet in understanding what happens to us, what happens to us in this existential condition that is that it has to do with a relationship between how ignorant that precocious logical intelligence is regarding what ultimately is truest and healthiest and most fulfilling to the form that is supposed to be and exist and thrive and continue to evolve. It just, like a mad pariah wants to keep going out there, and it does incredible things. I mean, it is a gift because it is what will cure diseases and what would bring paradise, by our own hands, a paradise that should conform to its owner, to its creator, the natural mind, the natural design, the natural intelligence. So it seems that the world, so the first thing that we should focus on understanding is what happens to us, not what has been done to us, which is how religions have been configured. God just did this to us and we're screwed. We came out wrong, and he's trying our best to get us to follow the right path. And so evil is something that we carry with us, and God is trying to help us overcome it or something. And that's the configuration that we have created religions on, even though I believe there are a few that try to nullify a conscious explanation of God by making him a void and therefore leaving us to our own devices, but none of them have succeeded. Even the Jewish religion, I think, has something like that in the Torah, but then eventually it's all about telling you how you have to behave and what to do and what not to do. It's all these instructions, because we're just screwed, and we need a higher, abstract, unseen, unknown, faith-based entity to know better for us, right? And that's how we've solved this disparity between this disparity or this lack of harmony or of the logical analytical intelligence, which invents and creates and builds the world and analyzes nature and decides what it can do, how it can learn from nature to do for us, and what is ultimately truest. To make an example, for example, we know water is fresh. Fresh is good when we drink it out of a stream. And so the fact that we know water is good for us and that we will find it, maybe even running fresh water is definitely better than just stagnant in a pool full of dirt. It's our ideas and thinking, intelligent thinking, that's very close to our simply present created state of intelligence. I mean, what understands simply what we are. We simply know. And then the logical and analytical intelligence starts thinking for how to solve when we run out of water, how to fix the problem when it evaporates, and we lose it in our storage bins. And so it starts inventing things. It starts creating, analyzing other ways. It sees that it stays fresh in a pool of sandstone or what have you. And so then somebody says, oh, well, we can do this. We can shape clay into a jar. And then we went and thought, this clay dries quicker. And before you know it, we made a jar that's toxic. And it's because our logical intelligence does not know how life was created, why every little thing. It just is very, very precocious at thinking and analyzing quickly. So I just call this a logical intelligence. And the relationship between these two is our existential predicament. It's why we are constantly tending to fail, to kill our own children in wars, to invent ridiculous ideologies. Because we're trying to solve something that is hurting what the natural condition simply is. And so, okay, let's see, 14 minutes. All right. What is homosexuality? Homosexuality is basically the inversion of the setup. By definition, there's only one design. And that is the starting base. The design is the two genders that complement for the purposes of sexuality in every single living form there is. And because it is, this is perhaps where it starts getting a little difficult to grasp. Because it is a setup that we call binary, it is as if it were one. There is no division in there. It is simply where it starts. It never stops being, actually, this binary flow of design, call it energy or biochemical, biological form or what have you, XY chromosomes. It continues to flow through all of life. Now, there are exceptions. I know very few and small, seemingly insignificant exceptions in nature, and I'm not going to pretend to explain, but I suspect that they are not an alternative. I think they are a simple way of solving something that we're not even close to understanding yet, because it's so deep and prior to why nature resorts to a binary system. So as a starting point, means that the male-female setup is not something that is meant to be thought of as rationalized with this precocious logical intelligence as separate things. We will run into troubles right away. We just kind of have to accept that as it is. But it is, we are to, actually, it would be wonderful, let me take that back. It would be wonderful if we were interested in understanding scientifically more the complementation of the male-female, because there's something quite amazing that nature does with in this complementing binary system, which is not symmetrical at all, and yet it's also symmetrical in some kind of paradigm, but it's not symmetrical. And the woman has kind of like is two, almost, it has two leaders, you know, two heads, to the production of the new human being in her uterus and her own. And so she's like two, and one that's ready to start, or latent, or however you want to say it, in her, where the male is just him. And you know, and to understand the relationship between male and female is also fascinating, because if we stop thinking of it as a competitive parallel comparison and see it in a three-dimensional space where it's vertical and horizontal, and we understand that paradigm existence is about being the same while also there being an order, where the guy is the one that tends to jump into the fire first and to save the whatever, the people or the family. A woman can also be the one that jumps in the fire, but there is sort of, we see the general numbers in the end pan out to things that demonstrate clearly a tendency of males that women don't have, maybe a tendency of women that males don't have. And yet, at the same time, nature made us interchangeable for a necessity of survival. And so, because the woman has to be quick at substituting, she also is prone to want to learn more so than men that have to learn in order to conquer something they want to achieve, or a problem they want to get out of the way, and they need to analyze, understand, and deal with. And the woman is quick to learn from what the guy learned. Anyways, I didn't want to lose into that, but I just want to say, I wanted to take back what I said. It would be great if we became more interested in this fascinating paradigmatical science of how we complement and are the same, and that we should be okay with it's not that one is a cleaner and one is a provider. You know, it's not like that. And we should lose all that and just realize that to get comfortable with many things that would describe and explain also the versatility of women. Anyways, what was I getting at? Oh yeah, okay, so because we are two bodies, there's nothing physical impeding this experimentative, precocious, logical mind to say, what would happen if, you know, I try it with the same gender? That's always going to be something that the human being, more so than animals, because we're so much more precocious with our logical and analytical intelligence, that we'll want to dare and try, and you know, where animals are more driven by the other side of their mind, which is just in tune with the day-to-day way they simply are designed and think in that present. We are more like, oh, want to go to the stars, and what happens if, you know, and So that is actually the pure definition of what homosexuality is, a behavior where you switch you go with the same gender. There isn't a deeper explanation. Now, it just so happens that our sexuality is very much at the core essence, like the spinal column of the path that is the development of each one of us. And everything will reflect upon our sexual expression and our sexual perception. Our self is connected to intrinsically part of our sense of personal sexuality. This is not a discovery. We were working on sexuality as a science not that long ago, 40, 50 years ago. And in fact, I believe 40, 50 years ago, maybe, sorry, I can't name drop there, but we started, Freud probably was the first one to, and Jung, talk about animus and anima, and started saying, well, wait a second, it seems that homosexuality occurs, like finally got the answer, finally started answering that question. But for all of history, and that's a whole subject, we've quashed that, now we don't allow people to talk scientifically, medically about homosexuality. It's become a civil right, and therefore we obligated ourselves to answer the question as being born, or nature. It is nature, but what nature versus nurture means in that discourse, in the contemporary discourse of what explains homosexuality, means you're just destined to be that, and it wasn't anything you could have chosen, or society could have done anything about. Well, it is natural, but society can do something about it. I'm getting to that. But wait, I don't want to lose focus, because why all these red flags? How is this? Because what I hear a lot about in these videos, and these smart doctors, scientists, great speakers, like Matt Walsh and many others, who at some point always get to, I've heard people, women, doctors, they get to this point where, how did this happen? How did we get to this extreme? How is this absurdity become like a norm for half the people, which is also something that I wanted to talk about. It's not left versus right. There's a group of people that leave this, and then there's those that don't, that see things more logically, and we're kind of dormant and let the other half go on without sounding the alarm or saying anything, because we were conditioned by society to start thinking about homosexuality a certain way, and so we kind of started immediately at the same time telling the other side, no, don't be mean. This is, you're being cruel. You're kicking them out of the family, and that's cruel, and it's not their fault. And so that which is partially true has silenced those that immediately would have said, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. And so the ones that don't make sense continued on to this extreme. And there's an explanation for these two sides also that has to do with how the brain is. Because indeed, the most important thing that humanity can do and develop as an intellectual subject is what happens to us. What happens to this brain once it exists socially on this planet? And what does it do to its own species? What does it do to itself as a living form? That's the first question that we should be really tackling, because everything most of our sufferings are created by ourselves, and especially in light of, many of our sufferings are biological diseases and stuff, but we're right there with understanding how they happen, how to contain them, how to stop them, how to cure them, not to mention killing ourselves in wars and ill distribution of food. It all has to do with how badly we use that logical analytical intelligence, where most of the worst sufferings that humanity as a whole goes through are done by ourselves. So therefore it stands to reason that the most important question we should ask ourselves is, what happens to us? Why do we do this? our existential condition as it would be explained by how the brain works that causes all these things to go wrong. And so, going back to, explaining how these red flags occurred, why they occur, what happens to us. Well, this is basically it. Homosexuality is actually fascinating. And when I'm talking about fascinating, I'm talking about homosexuality, but I'm also keeping in the bag, transgender ideology and and all the things, because they've all resulted, there have been repercussions of the same evolution, the same social ill evolution that we've been going through these last 40 years or what have you. But so it's important to understand human sexuality, because when you do, it all starts making sense. Basically, to get to a sort of spoiler, non-alerted spoiler, all of these people, and I'll include myself and so many others who maybe haven't even expressed any kind of, but we basically want to escape something. Especially the more obvious cases are kids who decide that they want to be a girl and they're a little boy, or little girls that say they want to be a little boy. There's something that, I can go there and I can be less affected, less pressure put on me. I don't have to suffer that. I don't have to, or I'll have more attention and I'll be treated with more love. And this has been talked about, actually. But all of it is believing that you are liberated to be your true self by living homosexually as a social life is also the same. It all comes from the same. But let me go back to the nature of homosexuality, which is the most important thing we could understand. Which, I don't want to say dysfunction, but I don't want to use dysfunction. I wish I had a better vocabulary, so I'll just say homosexuality, human homosexuality. Define them. Okay, what happens? We're talking about how it's so intrinsically part of step by step, starting, and there's tons of literature already. I mean, it is believed that by age 2 already the mother has influenced in a way, because it's the strongest bond initially, because there's evil moms out there, but also moms and parents they're formed by our cultural and social beliefs, so we can't really put the blame on anybody, because we're all constantly getting educated as we're growing and moving in time. We're learning from the society around us, so it's, it's really not about saying, ta-da, that person, they did it. We're all kind of doing our best and messing up along the way, all of us, because we haven't seized this condition of the logical and analytical intelligence screwing us up. That's basically the first thing that we got to do. I know I'm taking a tangent again, but the first thing that we got to do is say, okay, this is we have a busted ankle. That's our existential condition. That's the human being. A total disassociation of that which drives us, the logical, analytical, precocious, inventing intelligence, and how it's destined to never satisfy what the natural design and the natural present, always true and always present part of our reasoning intelligence, or awareness rather, is. It's just never going to be connected. It's never going to say, okay, I know how to design the best organic existence for you. The logical and analytical intelligence doesn't do that. It just it's got another function. It's got to look, investigate, dig, come up with, analyze, and so because of this disassociation, the first thing humanity needs to do is say, I got a perpetual, forever limping ankle. If I start running, I may feel that it's no longer there, but eventually, boom, there I went again. I killed my child in a war because I believed that country, blah, 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 blah. And then, oops, oh, I gave my dog a poisonous food additive. Oops, I constructed a bridge that could not hold and collapsed. Oops, that's our constant state, as we know, as the record shows, and mostly before our doing. So we've never actually seized. What we have done is said, okay, that which doesn't make sense, that constant collapsing, betraying of life, betraying of ourselves through constantly harming ourselves, that's not right. That's somewhere else. It can't be me who wants to hurt me. It can't be me who wants to hurt children. It can't be me who wants to poison me with the wrong kind of agriculture or the wrong kind of systems of building. There's got to be something else doing it. And so we explained it with several tales of a consciousness outside of us that explains why that happens. Well, it happens because you were born faulted or in sin, or you ruined paradise. And there's other, in other cultures that don't come to mind right now, but basically, we once were in the dream time, and then a big storm, a big dragon ate it all, and now we're screwed, and we kicked out of paradise. There's stories that explain why this predicament, this lack of synchronicity, syntony, occurs with the logical mind and the natural mind. And then comes the religion. Funny enough, this does not negate that there indeed is a creator. Very likely, you can deduce that scientifically, just crunching the numbers, that we're not hidden from any other life form. It's just kind of doing something. We're not meant to know, obviously, but so it's not atheistic to understand our true existential condition. A lot of people maybe never got even to that point, but it's important to understand it because it's not purely an analysis of our existential condition that frees us from being created. In fact, our logical intelligence, being so much further ahead than that of animals, may be the intentional will of creators that say, well, let's give them and then let's leave them with it. See what, oh God, look at, they're just killing themselves, poisoning themselves, hurting each other, spewing all sorts of confabulations about what society should be. But we got to let them, because that's free will. So there's also, it also comes back to theology. It's not disassociated from scripture, but it would require a total reinterpretation of scripture and the life of prophets or what have you. So that's all very interesting. And this, which I call Gaia humanism, does not negate anything. It just kind of reinterprets everything and reanalyzes everything. And so once we realize that the most important thing we can do is be vigilant because we trust, of course, our nature. Like I said in the very beginning, it is nature that produced, or it comes from natural creation, sourced from natural. This logical intelligence is precocious, arrogant, you can call it, that constantly betrays its own creator, was made to be trusted because it's sort of our sails, our horses that pull the carriage, and so we're always looking, and we're by nature default to trust. That's why we have such a hard time undoing ideologies that are clearly hurting our children, and we still don't know how to say, wait, we got it all wrong, and turn on a dime on it, because we don't understand this condition, this existential condition that I'm describing as a political global human science intelligence. We don't know this about ourselves. I don't know how else to say it. So getting back to the nature of homosexuality, which is very fascinating. So, because we are simply are this anatomical brain complementive design, we can call that a forward force. Everything is forward about it. Joining with the mate, the girl, or the girl with the guy, for attraction, and then everything is designed by evolution around securing some kind of stability around the offspring. And I think that's probably where jealousy and possessiveness comes from and all that, so that make sure that they don't take the dad away from the kids. The mom needs the kids, the father, and the father needs the kids, and it all kind of is meant to hold, right? It's not just for impregnation. Very likely evolution continued on with a bunch of things that are happening in our brain so that there is some sort of stability. Everything can be understood through thinking about what the child needs. That's another interesting thing that science should be. We have so many polemics, contradictions, and you don't have to have studied biology or science, human sciences of anatomy or what have you, to pretty much be in the right ballpark if you know that a toddler cannot walk too far without being eaten by a tiger. So the mother alone, hanging around with maybe 2 or 3 babies in her hand, I don't think evolution said, no, that's not, no, we need the men there, and the men claims the woman as owning her, owning her, and the babies are his, and, whatever, however you want to narrate this, it can all be explained by the needs of the child. All of sociological, civil stuff that we're, divorce laws and a bunch of stuff that we are contradictory about and are doing it wrong, and we just don't know how to change and turn on a dime. Like we said, well, it would be easy. We could easily produce a correcting template by simply laying on top of it the child's needs, and then okay, so divorces are going to be done this way because of what we already know. We already know what the child needs, which is to see that their parents are good friends, they love each other, they respect each other. The child doesn't care if they're screwing every night. I mean, maybe later when he's way past puberty, will understand, oh, that's why they didn't really care to have sex so much. But not now. What he wants to see is that they're getting along, they respect each other, that they laugh together. And so parents can be good friends, and divorce law can be re-engineered around that. Can be written about the child seeing, starting always from the child, that the dad is as involved in this, what he eats, what school he goes to, what his little boy is probably with a lot to do with bonding, if it's a little boy bonding with other little boys, or what have you. And so we already know stuff. So when you put yourself in evolution's, oh my God, 40 minutes. I'm so sorry. I really wanted to make this shorter. Put yourself in evolution's shoes and do this, right? Which is homosexuality, basically. It's changing these two forces, feminine and masculine, go forward in their purpose and everything, and you just do it together. When you have homosexuality, what you do is you do that and have sex. So let's break it down. Just open the scale up, go to a smaller scale. To understand homosexuality, you can basically do it through understanding 3 sectors. Biology, chemical biology of the body, sociology, social cultural, psychological, and personal development, which is also psychology. So what are these 3 areas? Chemical, they all fuse into one single thing. You can't play with them and treat them differently. No, they are always going to be present in how to understand and the understanding of homosexuality. I don't know if also sexuality, but we're not talking about sexuality having a problem. Because there's a reason why homosexuality occurs. So it's not a problem or an illness. It's a phenomena, yes. And so we're really poor with having words, for one thing. But it's not necessarily wrong in nature's view, because it does it for a reason. It happened, and that's where we start owning it. That's where we start saying society did it, parents, friends, the way the school was, all these influences. And that's why I'm first explaining these three areas, so that each thing that may be said in order to understand homosexuality has one of these three areas it belongs to. So, yeah, okay. Chemical, biological is kind of sexless. It gets aroused. It feels good. It wants to go. It's the force. It's the driving force that nature tricks us with to make sure that we do it, basically. So there's that, which explains a lot of things, a lot of morning afters for some guys. There's cultural, social, which is basically affecting how after whatever, 5 or 6, and that's why the matter of indoctrination is so important. Although, let me get there. Basically, as I'm learning to relate my sexuality to others, to what clearly becomes understood, it still is, I mean, no matter how much it still is overall by the whole world and everything. Because girls, little boys, I mean, children are taking in not just what parents say, not just what the drag queen wants to teach them in school, not just what Billy, his little best buddy, probably listens more to him than anybody else, but is listening to what people say to each other. Kids, we're all growing up as children listening to what people are saying to one another. So we're still pretty clear on boy, girl, men, women, and that's vast. And yet how we're going to start seeing those with who we will have sex, which is always the woman, and I mean the opposite gender, and then the generalized sort of detaching ourselves from the contemporary ideologies that are happening right now. Let's just standardize all of human history for the purposes of this discussion. How I will relate to women according to what culture and society, right? And so you have, for example, in some Middle Eastern country, to give a brutal example, that the guy expects the woman to be gentle and recipient and accepting, and he's supposed to be very respectful, but then she's, and it's a way of coming to, and it's very bonding, and once they do it, it's a big deal, and and all these things that will matter and how these young people start having sex will be learned through development after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, till their first sexual acts come from social, cultural. And then the third element, the personal process, the digestive part of all of these things, which have to do, where chemical and biology are a little less involved, because they're just going to go. It's just going to make you want to do it, and especially if it show you how good it feels, so then it washes its hands and says, see, you just go there, right? So we're talking less about biological and chemical, but we're talking more about how social, cultural, and personal development. Now, the personal psychology, is divided in natural psychology and the developed psychology. So there are things that we just do as people that are part of our psychology. Like if somebody is aggressive towards us, at some point we jump and defend ourselves, or we want to hurt that person back. whether we do it right away, whether we know how to stay calm and answer back forcefully right away upon an aggression, or whether we like put our tail behind between our legs and walk away and then hate that person and want to see them get crushed by a truck, will have to do with how we were developed psychology by society and family. So there's in the personal psychological part, there is another split, but we'll put it in one category for the purposes of understanding homosexuality. So, in any case, let's put that aside. 45 minutes. Let's put that aside. People tell me, make him shorter, make him shorter. I can't. It's impossible. Because of the fact that we did this, okay, the guy is saying, let's just be a little crude here, it says wants to penetrate, wants to possess, wants to thrust, you know, it's that kind of energy, right? When you create homosexual behavior, immediately the brain, let's just talk about guys. And you know what? I hope someday I meet a girl that can be my parallel and we can complete the subject. So a lot of things I can only talk about what it is like for guys. And it is the nature of women, like I said before, is different. There's a versatility of two forces, two pushes, or two entities innate in her brain, like Matt was saying earlier. It's not just which I always said, it's not, our body is not separate from our brain. If you were born a woman, there are things, and we know this also at the physical level. There's parts of the brain that are even shaped differently. Okay, and so when you create homosexual behavior, immediately the guy says, oh, but this would mean that the other guy will want to go there, right? So there is a natural aversion, not created by ideology or religious indoctrination or anything. All you have to do is look at the body. Look at the body. Now, if I was a woman and I know what sex is about, I'm receiving. I don't have a problem with that. I know that my vagina is meant, it lubricates, it's meant to receive. But the guy is not, and his mind is not either. And so there's a natural aversion that happens not because of religious and social indoctrination or anything, like the community wants to say, but because it is what naturally happens when you do that. And so this is where it becomes interesting. The nature of homosexuality, different to human sexuality, it is within human sexuality, but the nature of homosexuality itself, at least when it comes to men, I think a woman would explain female homosexuality maybe with more eloquence, would need more eloquence than me, definitely, to explain some other nuances. But as far as men go, there is a natural aversion in the nature of it. So it stands to reason, because for all of history, guys, half the guys, have been, hang him, offensive, ew, weird, it's secretly, let's not let anybody see, or whatever. It's a repulse, a rejection, repelling, I didn't mean to say repulsive, a repelling force. But remember the three components? There's also the chemical biological, which doesn't care to repel it, which comes, well, I don't know, this could feel good, and what I need to do is ejaculate and feel good and be touched and be made to feel like important, like a man. And so why is it easier for a straight guy, for example, to be given, I'm sorry, I have to go there, have to be given head than to be penetrated? And there's a lot more resistance. Maybe he'll let himself, and then he'll make sure that it just puts a bunch of blankets over it and tries to bury it in the past of his life. But if he has anal sex, it becomes just that much more naturally traumatic. It's naturally traumatic, not because it's actual pathology trauma in the field of psychology, but because of the condition of paradigm condition of aversion and attraction. And so it's like he did it to himself, in a sense. It's fascinating. Homosexuality, human homosexuality is a fascinating subject, actually. And we could understand so much of it by understanding its nature, understanding these three areas, and understanding the simultaneously fascinated or attracted or interested or open, and the strong aversion that happens because of the flipping around of energies. That's why this also explains why it's pretty different to how women feel about having sex together. But I can't explain that because I'm not a woman. So understanding this, now let's go back in history. It explains why we have always felt very uncomfortable and shy and trepidatious. Now remember, we have to clear ideas that have to do with contemporary indoctrination of culture and society with ideas that would want us to judge what I'm saying right now a certain way. We have to try to clear to what our design has lived like most of its evolutionary history, let's say starting 5,000, of course it's dozens of thousands of years that we've been evolving, or a million, or however many it is. But let's just talk about the last 6,000 years that we know there's culture registered, and little vases that show guys playing together. I always say this, they talk about the Greeks and the Romans, being so advanced because they accepted, and they love to say these sort of things. But I would bet you anything that even back then, because of understanding the nature, the natural design of human sexuality, and therefore what occurs when homosexuality occurs in human homosexuality, that there were in society sort of allocated places to give a certain kind of status and a certain degree of dignity to that kind of behavior, and maybe they turned it into a luxury. If you were a senator and you had a boy, they gave it a place. But then there was probably a huge amount of men and stuff that just didn't look with any kind of respect towards that which the senators did, or that the soldiers did in Sparta. It was something they had to accept because they were defenders of the country. But there was always probably a part of society that was uncomfortable because the very nature of homosexuality has that, and which explains also why a lot of gay guys today in America will not want to remember or accept that. But why that first time something seemed like you were trying to go uphill, like they had to show you how to do it. You didn't just, with a girl, you might get nervous. You might be a little fearful if you're an insecure guy. If you were, very tamed but with manners in your family. But it's not something that physically you will run into any kind of repelling force. In homosexuality, the first experiences have something that happens weird, and they have to teach you. You have to get over that hump. You have to get over that first few times. And so it all agrees to how we're designed. So basically, I'm explaining all this, 54 minutes. I'm explaining all this to say that because of the nature of it being so intimately difficult to talk about, especially for men, and men still pretty much lead the world. Men are talking about how much more women should, and they're putting them everywhere, and they're making sure there's just as many employee women, but it's still guys are the ones that are sort of behind the scenes designing institution. And I mean, now it's changing maybe because guys want to do that, but we're still not there yet. And I don't want to take a tangent, but it's not that that women shouldn't lead, or men should lead, or shouldn't lead as much, or what have you. I think we basically need to come to terms with our own true nature and let each one of us do comfortably without the pressure of needing to be equal, symmetrically, but just releasing perhaps the ideas of control. I'm taking a tangent again. And this is, but you know, there's reasons why the Muslims, anyways, I don't want to go there. You got to understand that everything humanity does has a reason that comes from a real matter. The nature of girl, I grew up, you know, always paying a lot of attention to how women treated me and other men for some reason, maybe because of my mother had such a huge personality, dominating, and she like lied a lot and violent and hostile, confrontational. It made me pay attention to, it does seem like women want to sort of take the steering, just take the steering wheel away from you, just because. And guys seem to be more calm and like, they wait, they just let it happen and see what happens. Then they just step forward when they had enough and they do what they want. I don't know. There is something that describes a lot, but I don't want to get into that, and wouldn't be fair. What I want to explain is that because it is difficult, because the nature of homosexuality is difficult to look at. It's like an eclipse in a sense, because it's so much sexuality and the factors that because the development, homosexuality happens to human sexuality, right? Now, there are possibly a lot of conspiring forces to that occurrence. And it's very possible that the number would be a lot lower in society, were it just where social cultural influences and the way we're raising our kids to how we respect, how well we treat, how loved, how secure we make them feel, and the cultural teaching and social teachings, and we made it perfect, let's say, and we just let nature do its third of the parts that are believed to have nothing to do with psychology and psychological development, social cultural influences, but the parts that have to do with chemical and biology. They're not just about the forces of sexual desire, but there are a lot of theories, so they have started a lot of types of ideas, concepts of science that say that maybe after so many male boys, the younger ones tend to be. Now, this is the thing, or hormones in the uterus. If a mother is angry, hates men, or is fighting a lot, this could influence the hormonal development of the baby. But this is where we're mistaken. It's not that nature says, okay, so then it's going to be the other thing, the female. It's going to be that's where we make the mistake. With nature, it's more like it lowers the intensity, lowers the vehemency, lowers the intent, the force, the drive. It pushes it back. It doesn't have a problem with whether it wants to make a boy or a girl, a male or a female. That's something we created because we don't understand ourselves, basically. It's important. We better start soon. So it's more like the person is born with presenting a field that will be more or less affected by that which will later continue to its development, its sexual development. So in other words, I think I said this in another video I also sent to Matt for this. The person can be, two boys can be twins, and the mother, let's say, it never is that way, but even a slight difference, the boy will say, well, I notice how he treats my twin brother differently. But let's say that they're identical. The one little boy will, let's say the fifth male son, the youngest one, or the mother that had a certain kind of pregnancy, or maybe some genes that are just make a certain type of personality. Because then we haven't even talked about this. There are people can be more one of these two regions of personality that end up creating the political field of society in the world today, especially today. It's just right versus left kind of thing, but which in reality is more collective sensitivity versus logical individual sensitivity. And they're both together in every one of our brains. But in society, it's interesting how they're expressing two different camps more and more in the West, it seems. So yeah, so it's not that nature says, well, I'm going to send them more towards girl or more towards boys, or, you know, because if you think about it, do you think evolution would have, when it's so clear about our anatomical form and function, that it would say, well, yeah, but I'm throwing you a left ball. Although it looks one way on the outside, inside it will be more optimally complemented by having sex with the same gender. That's just our own invention. That's not something nature doesn't think of it that way. Nature's male or female, that's the starting point. And then a whole bunch of stuff modulates, forms, influences, weakens, strengthens certain parts, intensifies here and that, but it's basically a male or a female. And it can be a very different expression of a female versus another very different expression of a female. But that's what we need to understand, and what we need to get to in our cultural intelligence. We were kind of closer to that before. The problem occurs that at some point, and this is where I was getting at 10 minutes ago, we gave in to how difficult it is to talk about this. The nature of sexuality already is intimate. But when it comes to homosexuality, it also it's a short circuit. We find it very difficult to be comfortable with understanding it. And so we've always defaulted to, well, you know, those are a gay person, which is like saying they were born that way since the beginning of time, probably during Roman times and before that. The Persians and everybody else who had some form of social expression of homosexual behavior, I don't think they had, maybe they did. Because it's, you know, intuitively, we also can understand that something happens to the development. You know, before the rise of the community, the gay community movement, what have you, ideologies of homosexuality and so forth, I remember growing up in Latin American country and listening to older friends of my father, uncles, and talk about children, you know, and like the women would not be around and the children were left playing around the fathers and stuff, and they have dad conversations about being a father and stuff, and you listen as a kid pretending you're playing with your buddy, but you're actually listening, right? You could hear that we had a wiser sense of development occurring, homosexuality occurring as a development in childhood, and the way your mom treated you. We would just say it. We'd crack jokes about it. Keep treating him that way. He's gonna come out funny, right? Nobody taught him that. I mean, that was nothing. The church didn't teach him to say it that way. It was just wise intuition. At some point, in Stonewall, Christopher Street, we're so challenged, we're so faced against the problematic that it caused, that we came to meet face to face with how difficult it has always been for humanity to calmly talk about it. Because for some man, for 2/3 of that pie that I described in the beginning, social cultural, basically, made by all the forms that didn't mostly rejected homosexuality, and the 50% of the repelling force that simply occurs in any guy that starts thinking about it, guy that just never has no inclination, no interest. It is difficult. It is complicated also, and I'm not a person who's equipped and capable of calmly dissertating and opening up all the different areas that come together in a single understanding. But what I wanted to get, my point of this video was that because dealing with it, looking at it with calm, kind, wise, accepting intelligence is difficult, has always been difficult. It can be overcome, but I'll say that later. Because it has always been difficult, we run towards, because we always got to answer all questions, and we always got to solve the problem or the stuff that's uncomfortable. We create formulas, explanations, drag queen shows, 50 years ago or 100 years ago. We give them a place where, it's okay. That person was born that way. They can be part of society. They entertain us with a fantasy show, and different. And then what we didn't know what to do with, we kind of kicked them outside of our attention field and ignored them, or we always had to solve and create some kind of format or deal with it somehow, or expel them from the family, or it's an artist. So okay, you can be gay because you're a painter, you're a wonderful poet. And so Oscar Wilde all of a sudden came, all the accolades of being a member of society came to him, even though he was gay, because we can justify, we will say that the feminine part of the brain, which is what we believed, gave him the talent of being a good writer or something like that. And so we always needed to answer the question. But we did, until more pressure was put on us or it got more complicated. So at some point, we simply said, no, to continue pursuing psychology, sciences, it's beyond the nature, the natural default, the overall natural default is to not accept it in the sort of overall purpose of an intuitively felt directionality or trajectory of evolution. Yet there's a force that wants us to include it, and that we also don't. We understand it's natural because there are sexual forces and it just makes it justifiable. So there's that living contradiction that I explained differently before. That in itself is a difficult situation, complicated and sophisticated, because you have to every time go, well, let's look at that life. We don't know the mother, we don't know the father, maybe because it was those kids that he was running around with. It becomes a project, an intellectual project on each person. It's too much to understand, and it's too demanding of accountability, because we ultimately, even if the kid came out with not that much vehemency for being a guy, and he's being all forceful and pushy and forward, and let's say a total alpha stallion, he's still, geez, I forgot what I was going to say. Would not have necessarily necessarily resorted to satisfying his need for being loved, for being accepted, included, what have you, with the approval and desire of another man. Were society and culture been ready to know that some guys are just really come out fragile that way? So, in other words, a wiser society, first of all, we need to understand that it never has to do with individuals. It has to, we all create the world that produces a rising or a decreasing number of homosexual desire in individuals. It's not, we have to take the focus off, like we block the eclipse with a little disc of cardboard to see the eclipse of the sun. We have to do the same thing when it comes to understanding properly homosexuality. We have to block thinking that it's about the person, which is the opposite religion does. You know, you're a sinner, it's to be expected, you know. But the devil got you. And look at everything that happened around that life, starting from when the mother took it into its arms to the kind of neighborhood society, cultural messages, way the father treated it, the way that subsequently, because of that, the kids treated it in school, treated him in school, and so we understand it. So that means that to be a society and a culture that owns its own biological natural homosexuality means that we kind of continue being the wise dad that understood how he's starting to go soft, though he's far from reaching even the start of sexual development. Right away he gets it, and he makes him play with other little boys and gets him to get along with a lot of guys his age, or things that intuitively come that now are being fought, because yes, sometimes they're done wrongly, but they're not wrongly thought. It's the right intuition. Sometimes it has to do with the kid learns from everybody around him. If the little boy is always with a sister and he's not able to push a periscope outside of that environment of his sister's girlfriends, and have a line connecting him to how he should think as a little boy because of what the dad says about the girls around him. Just don't listen to girls, you're going to drive my son crazy. What are you doing there? Spending all your day with girls, whatever. Little comment, a jokey joke that the father might say as he walks past his son playing with girls, his sister's girlfriends all the time. But that's enough for the boy to never lose that. Okay, what matters to me is my dad's comment. So I'm aware that I should be with other little boys doing things with my guy friends. He may not verbalize it in his mind, but that connection to his father or other male mentors in his growing toddler years are starting to. It's really complex. It's wonderful. And we were actually going there until Stonewall happened. We were actually going, yes, there are a lot of hideous, wrong ways that we went about it, because we focused on the individual. We didn't know how to say, well, if this came to the development of that toddler through the outside mom, parents, society, then we see that the tree is starting to lean that way. We can catch it in time, and who's to say when exactly that time is over, because it may not be over until after puberty even, or after adolescence even. But let's just say the more classical case, that we can catch it in time. The way to get that tree to continue going up is by all the same forces that have had to do with it starting to lean over, which means the friends, the way mom and dad treat him, give him more credit, trust. And trust is a big deal, when kids are canceled out and they're not saying, I trust you to go do this. I know it's a tricky thing. I don't want to get into a seven sleeved shirt, because it's happened sometimes that, kids are trusted and they screw up and the parent doesn't try again, and then the kid sees, yeah, that was a freak thing that he trusted me. What I was expecting is what he eventually did, and didn't trust me again. So the dads, the moms don't know how to create that reality that will strengthen and give them a girthy sense of self-worth and self-perception. We could all learn to be better parents, I'm sure. And homosexual development is all about raising our children and how well we understand the nuances of biological nature and how situations may work and in other situations will work differently, or how situations will cause something and other situations will not cause as much or will not cause at all, because we understand. All of this is very difficult if we continue to believe that it's decided by God or nature, and in order to be an ideology or a civil right, you can only build a civil construction. And so this is what I was getting at. You can only build a civil right, ideological civil right discourse if you stop pondering and dwelling on the area of science and nature and medicine, psychology, sociology, culture, biology, chemistry, and everything else that should be, are the subjects that relate to homosexuality. Civil rights is only part of it because we've decided to no longer care to understand it, and so now it becomes about a group of people that and so because of our fear, of our shyness, of looking at it, and because of the difficulty, precisely that it fosters us to find it toiling and difficult and embarrassing or shameful for maybe some dad that knows, maybe, all of a sudden the mom knows that all along she was laughing and thinking that her best friend, her gay best friend, she treated the boy like a piece, like inconsequential, but she treated her best gay friend in ways, in a candor, in a gentleness that the boy never saw her treat him with. So then he started looking at that's what I gotta be, right? So let's say that somehow, suddenly, in a matter of months, which is unrealistic, of course, the mom gave an intellectual leap and understood that she was a big part of him needing to look for guys or identifying himself or behaving as he would, as a gay guy would. It is about accountability and heaviness too. And so the pursuit of psychology and natural sciences, human sciences, is difficult, and for various reasons. It's against the nature because we kind of don't want it. We kind of don't want it. At the same time, we want to let it be, but we don't want. And then there is the accountability, and then there's a lot of forces that just make it very difficult. It's sort of like Icarus and Icarus, right? The father didn't want it to go to the tower, the top of the Tower of Babel, but he wanted to go anyways, and it was destined to collapse. It's almost like fated to go against it. But of course, that's just a metaphor. In reality, we can understand the science of homosexuality. It's a huge thing, and perhaps for practical purposes, it would be all right to leave it at a level while we take care of other worse problems that we do to ourselves in human civilization, like wars. But to leave it at a place that's sensible, like, okay, we know that society, parents, whatever, conducive, more likely candidate to be worsely affected by these things happen, but it's not him, it's society. If we were able to say, as a culture, it's not him, it's society, it's the world around, his growing up years, that has to do with the development of his homosexuality, we would be, eons ahead of the game. because we could leave it at a place, even if we don't start prescribing sophisticated ways to become like the missing dad society, the culture that becomes the missing parents, and know how to pull that guy up like that, age 16, 17, 18, 22, and get him to straighten that tree when it's already pretty grown. Even if we don't become that sophisticated and complex, we can still get it right as far as understanding that in a sense they're victims of something we all did collectively. So like something that happens to humanity because of how inadequate we are at designing civilization still. And we can live with that. We can accept that. It's something that nature does to compensate, right? There's something that it just needs. And any gay guy, quote unquote, will tell you that he feels like he's arrived at a harbor, a truce, a place where now he can drink calmly, and he can stop running, or he won't suffer the pressure anymore once a guy contains him, love sexually. It's an illusion because the guy is also looking for the same, and get into that messy gay community thing. But as far as it would be better to not have a gay community, because then and really be like, okay, this is just somebody who never developed his shoulders, or has a speech impairment, or it doesn't make him less of anything. It's just somebody that happened to when they were growing up, but they can do anything. And they have these attributes. They tend to not be belligerent. Not true. Not true. But whatever, whatever will typically kinder to animals. I think that's one. And embrace those things in all ways. But when we say these are people who were affected by our culture and society, not people who did anything, we are sort of telling ourselves to do that, right? We're telling ourselves, don't blame them. Don't blame them for what? For what they did? It's not. It happened to them. Like it happened to their uterus when they were growing up. It's something that came from them, or it was decided to their lives, at their lives. We're still not really understanding, because we don't understand the fully developed concept of nurturing the development of homosexuality in society, as it would be expressed by a growing number of men and women that end up needing to seek the love of the same gender. We're not clear. We've never been clear about that. It would be a leap for us. But if we got there, and we finally got that notion across scientifically, and it made the news and the covers, and it's like, it turns out that we all do this to ourselves, and these people end up growing up in society because of a confabulation and a conspiracy of influences, and personal, intimate, society, cultural, biological, chemical, even perhaps something in the environment, and all this, whatever they are the recipients, they have nothing to do with it. They were just standing there doing nothing, ready to be born, and boom, it all happened to them. And we all took on the accountability of homosexuality occurring in society. It would change it to something much better. But first of all, we wouldn't be so mean about it, because it's easy to be mean when you can say, I didn't do it. They did it. They're the crazy ones. But when we say, I had my little 0.00% to do with that person not being interested in the opposite gender, it changes everything. It changes our intelligence, our cultural manner, our science about it, everything. So that would be a good place to arrive at. But what I wanted to do with this video was explain all the red flags that they occur. It's almost like saying, okay, this is how I'm going to say it. Like if you had a powerful jet of water coming out of a hose that you needed to point into an orifice for it to flow past the wall, right? Which would be analogous to having the proper owning our own homosexuality as a species, as part of something that can happen to human sexuality, and explaining it socially, culturally, scientifically, and finally in the single and only comprehensive, logical, sensible truth of all of it. And instead we closed that and said, no, that's not something that develops, it's not something that occurs, it's not something that happens to us. It's just a certain number of people that are born that way without explanation. We never stop wanting to explain it. That's the whole thing. We never stop. That's why gay couples want to get married, want to adopt, and they want to be grandparents, and they want this, and they want that. And they never stop. You know, it's like it just never. Why are they never satisfied? I'm sorry to say it that way, but why does it continue on 50, 60 years later? It's more and more and more. Now transgender. Now we'll become a woman. Surgically, if getting married and adopting children is not enough, I will change my body, you know, because we close that orifice in the wall. We don't explain it and know it and own it for what it is, to biology of the human form, of the human being, socially speaking, as a collective that we are. And by saying that it is, simply is, and no question, stop asking why, meaning, which is the same as saying you're either born or not born that way, which is what the civil discourse obligated us to do, civil right discourse obligated us to do. It starts pushing into social complex discourses that lead every time more unnaturally away from that stream of water. So that's what these flags, these red flags, all are. People want to know, how did this happen? This is my best attempt at explaining how it happened. Because it wants to be answered, and we shut the door on answering how lack of full sexual development, maturation happens, it continues to create things that attempt to answer the question. But every time we see its latest proposal, because this is completely absurd and crazy, red flag, and then another one, and then another one, and it's all about not having too much intelligence for how difficult it is to face the proper explanation of why homosexuality occurs to the human species. Okay, that's it. Sorry it was so long.